On December 6, 1917, at 9:04 and 35 seconds in the morning, Halifax, Nova Scotia experienced the largest accidental man-made explosion in human history prior to nuclear weapons. The detonation released 2.9 kilotons of TNT equivalent energy. It killed approximately 1,800 people and injured 9,000 more. It destroyed 1.6 square miles of urban territory, but the significance lies not in what occurred, but in what nearly occurred. Halifax came within several hundred meters of total urban destruction. Its survival was not the result of preparedness or planning. It was contingent on geography, timing, and chance. This is an examination of how a city nearly ceased to exist and why it did not. Halifax in December 1917 was the primary assembly point for transatlantic convoys supplying the Allied war effort. On any given day, 60 to 80 vessels occupied the harbor, many carrying ammunition, fuel, and military explosives. The harbor connects to Bedford Basin through a narrow strait called the Narrows, 400 meters wide at its most constricted point. All traffic passed through this single channel. Under wartime conditions, extreme risk had been normalized. The SS Mont Blanc was a French cargo steamer carrying a catastrophic load: 2,300 tons of picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, 10 tons of gun cotton, and 35 tons of benzol, volatile aviation fuel stored in drums on her deck. She bore no external markings. To observers, she appeared to be an ordinary merchant vessel. The SS Imo, a Norwegian relief ship traveling in ballast, was outbound through the Narrows that same morning. Maritime rules were explicit. Inbound traffic was to keep to the Halifax side of the channel. Outbound traffic was to keep to the Dartmouth side. The Mont Blanc followed the rules. The Imo did not. The Imo was traveling too fast, riding high in the water, and drifted into the center of the channel. Whistle signals were exchanged indicating incompatible courses. Neither vessel yielded sufficient room. At 8:54 a.m., the Imo's bow struck the Mont Blanc on her starboard side. The collision itself was not catastrophic. No one was killed by the impact. But the Imo's bow ruptured several benzol drums. As the ship separated, steel scraped against steel. Sparks ignited the benzol vapor instantly. Benzol vapor detonates. The fire spread across the Mont Blanc's forward deck within seconds. The crew understood exactly what this meant. Beneath the fire were approximately 2,500 tons of high explosives. Detonation was certain. The only variable was time. They abandoned ship immediately, rowing toward Dartmouth and shouting warnings in French. Most observers did not understand. No general alarm was sounded. Halifax possessed no citywide warning system. The fire was visible across the harbor. Crowds gathered at windows, on rooftops, and along the waterfront. Harbor workers continued their routines. Schools remained in session. The Mont Blanc drifted against Pier 6 and burned for 4.5 minutes in full view of downtown Halifax. No one except the crew understood they were watching a countdown. At 9:04 and 35 seconds, the holds reached critical temperature. The picric acid detonated. The explosion released 2.9 kilotons of energy, approximately 1/5 the yield of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The fireball reached 1,000 meters in diameter. Surface temperatures exceeded 5,000 degrees Celsius. The Mont Blanc ceased to exist as a coherent object. Her anchor shank, half a ton of steel, was later found 3.2 kilometers away. The blast wave produced peak overpressure of approximately 3,000 pounds per square inch at ground zero. At 500 meters, approximately 70 pounds per square inch, sufficient for total structural collapse. At 1,000 meters, severe structural damage and near-universal window failure. At 2,000 meters, roof collapse and partial wall failure. The explosion also displaced an enormous volume of water, generating an 18-meter tsunami that struck both shorelines. The detonation was audible up to 400 kilometers away. But the destruction was not uniform. It was concentrated north of the detonation point. This directionality determined whether Halifax survived.
The Richmond District, a working-class neighborhood of 1,600 structures housing approximately 6,000 people, sat 600 to 800 meters north of the explosion. Within this zone, survival was exceptional. Wood frame houses disintegrated. Masonry buildings collapsed. The Richmond Railway yards were obliterated. Rail cars were thrown from their tracks. Thermal radiation caused severe burns at distances exceeding 1 kilometer. Blast overpressure caused internal hemorrhaging. Every window in Halifax, approximately 80,000 panes, shattered simultaneously, sending glass through the air at lethal velocity. Thousands were permanently blinded. Penetrating wounds were nearly universal among survivors within 2 kilometers. Richmond was erased. But downtown Halifax, approximately 2,500 meters south of the explosion, remained largely intact. This asymmetry was not random. It was the result of 3 geographic factors. First, harbor geometry. The explosion occurred at the northern terminus of the harbor. Downtown lay to the south, 2.5 kilometers away. Second, topography. The western shoreline rises steeply from the waterline. This terrain partially shielded downtown from the blast wave and redirected destructive force northward into Richmond. Richmond received approximately 40 to 70 pounds per square inch of overpressure. Downtown received approximately 5 to 10. The threshold for total structural collapse is 20 pounds per square inch. Third, building density. Richmond consisted primarily of closely spaced wood frame structures. Downtown construction was masonry, heavier, more widely separated. Wood structures disintegrated. Masonry structures were damaged but remained standing. Timing also mattered. The explosion occurred at 9:04 in the morning on a Thursday. Downtown was only partially occupied. Had the explosion occurred 3 hours later, casualties in the commercial district would have doubled or tripled. Statistical analyses estimate that if the Mont Blanc had detonated 500 meters further south, casualties would have exceeded 10,000 and the commercial district would have been destroyed. Halifax survived because of where the explosion happened, not because of what anyone did. Within minutes, Halifax had lost functional cohesion as an urban system. Communication infrastructure collapsed. Water mains fractured, eliminating fire suppression. Electrical service failed across approximately 2/3 of the city. Halifax possessed 3 hospitals with a combined capacity of approximately 300 beds. By 10 o'clock in the morning, more than 9,000 individuals required medical treatment. Triage protocols did not exist. Anesthesia supplies were exhausted within hours. Emergency stations were established in schools and churches. Infection rates in the following days were nearly universal. Fires ignited throughout the damaged areas and merged into a district-wide conflagration in Richmond. The absence of water pressure made firefighting impossible. At 6 o'clock that evening, a blizzard struck. 16 inches of snow fell over the following 24 hours. The storm extinguished fires but killed an unknown number of trapped and injured individuals. Makeshift shelters became overcrowded and unheated. External assistance arrived within 24 hours. Boston dispatched a relief train carrying physicians, nurses, and medical supplies within 12 hours of receiving news. By December 10th, the immediate crisis had stabilized. Final count, 1,782 confirmed dead, 9,000 injured, 6,000 homeless, 12,000 buildings damaged or destroyed. Richmond had ceased to exist. But Halifax, as a functioning city, remained. The Halifax explosion occupies a specific position in the history of industrial catastrophe, the first urban event in which accidental detonation of modern military explosives produced city-scale destruction. For comparison, Halifax, 1917, 2.9 kilotons, approximately 2,000 deaths. Texas City, 1947, 2.7 kilotons, 581 deaths. Beirut, 2020, 0.5 to 1.1 kilotons, 218 deaths. Halifax remained the largest and most lethal accidental explosion in North American history. The explosion generated immediate regulatory changes. Explosive cargoes were required to be marked. Harbor traffic protocols were standardized internationally. These measures reduced, but did not eliminate, the risk of similar events. Historians categorize Halifax as a near-total urban loss, a city that came within quantifiable margins of complete functional collapse, but did not cross that threshold. Subsequent analyses estimated that if the explosion had occurred 300 meters closer to downtown, Halifax would have been completely destroyed. The margins were narrow. Halifax did not survive because of warning systems. No warning was given. It did not survive because of structural resilience. Most structures within the blast radius were destroyed. It did not survive because of emergency response. The response was improvised and overwhelmed. It survived because the explosion occurred at the northern edge of the harbor rather than closer to downtown. Because topography channeled the blast away from the city center. Because the detonation occurred in the morning rather than at midday. Because critical infrastructure lay beyond the radius of total destruction. The lesson of Halifax is not one of heroism or preparedness. It is a lesson in the fragility of urban systems subjected to sudden catastrophic energy release. Cities can be destroyed not only by intent, but by error, by contingency, by the intersection of routine decisions under normalized risk. Halifax survived, but its survival was contingent, and contingency is not control.
Thank you for watching. This channel examines moments when cities came close to oblivion and why some survived. If you want to see the next case, like this video and subscribe to Close to Oblivion TV.